Bihari, Jai Radha Madhava, Jaya Kunja Bihari, Gopi Janavallabha, Jaya Girivardhari, Gopi Janavallabha, Jaya Girivardhari, Yashodanandana, Jaya Vrajajanaranjana, Yashodanandana, Jaya Vrajajanaranjana, Yamunatiravanachari, Jaya Kunja Bihari, Yamunatiravanachari, Jaya Kunja Bihari, Jaya Radha Madhava, Jaya Kunja Bihari, Jaya Radha Madhava, Jaya Kunja Bihari, Gopi Janavallabha, Jaya Girivardhari, Gopi Janavallabha, Jaya Girivardhari, Yashodanandana, Jaya Vrajajanaranjana, Yashodanandana, Jaya Vrajajanaranjana, Yamunatiravanachari, Jaya Kunja Bihari, Yamunatiravanachari, Jaya Kunja Bihari, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Jai Radha Madhava, Radha Madhava, Shri Radhe, Jaya Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Pravajakacharya Stvasata. His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Pravajakacharya Stvasata. His Divine Grace Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaja Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON founder Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Nitai Gaur Premanandi. Hari Hari Bol. Okay. Hare Krishna devotees. Thank you for coming for today's online Bhagavatam class. Today we are continuing our reading of the Gancharaj Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 7, The Science of God, Chapter 8, Lord Nrsingadev slays the king of the demons, and today we're reading text 53. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Shri Kampurusha Uvacha. Vayam Kampurushastvavtu Mahapurusha Ishvaraha Ayam Kampurusho Nashto Dikrita Sadhubir Yada Vayam Kampurushastvavam Vayam Kampurushastvavam tu Mahapurushas Ishvaraha Avyam Purusho Nashto Dikrita Sadhubir Yada Vayam Purushastvavam tu Mahapurusha Ishvaraha Avyam Purusho Nashto Dikrita Sadhubir Yada. Would anybody like to chant the verse?
I would like to chant the verse.
Yes.
Shri Kim Purusha Uchuhu Vayam Kim Purusha Stvam tu Maha Purusha Ishvaraha Ayam Ku Purusho Nashto Dikrita Sadhubir Yada.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to chant?
Shri Kim Purusha Uchu Ayam Kim Purushastvam tu Mahapurusha Ishvaraha Ayam Kim Purusho Nashto Dikrita Sadhubir Yada.
Thank you, Prabhu. Anybody else?
Shri Kim Purusha Uchu Vayam Kim Purushastvam tu Mahapurusha Ishvaraha Ayam Ku Purusho Nashto Dikrita Sadhubir Yada.
Thank you, Dina Palika. Synonyms. Shri Kimpurusha Uchuhu, the inhabitants of Kimpurusha Loka. Vayam, we. Kimpurushaha, the inhabitants of Kimpurusha Loka, or significant living entities. Tvam, your lordship. Tu, however. Mahapurusha, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Ishvaraha, the Supreme Controller. Ayam, this. Kimpurushaha, the most sinful person. Hiranyakashipu. Nashta, slain. Dikrita, being condemned. Sadhubir, by the saintly persons. Yada, when. Translation of purport by Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation. The inhabitants of Kimpurusha Loka said, "We are insignificant living entities, and you are the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Supreme Controller. Therefore, how can we offer suitable prayers unto you?" When this demon was condemned by devotees because they were disgusted with him, he was then killed by you. Purport. The cause of the Supreme Lord's appearance on this earth is stated in Bhagavad Gita 4:7 through 8 by the Lord himself. Yada yada hi dharmasya glanhir bhavati bharata abhutanam adharmasya tadatmanam srijamaham pranichanaya sadhunam vanishaya chadushkatam dharma sangstapanhartaya sambhavami yuge yuge. Whenever and wherever there is a decrease in religious principles and a predominant rise in irreligion, at that time I descend myself, to deliver the pious and to annihilate the miscreants, as well as to re-establish the principles of religion. I myself appear millennium after millennium. The Lord appears in order to execute two kinds of activities, to kill the demons and to protect the devotees. When the devotees are too disturbed by the demons, the Lord certainly appears in different incarnations to give the devotees protection. The devotees following in the footsteps of Prahlad Maharaj should not be disturbed by the demoniac activities of the non-devotees. The devotees following in the footsteps of Prahlad Maharaj should not be disturbed by the demoniac activities of the non-devotees. Rather, they should stick to the principles as sincere servants of the Lord, and rest assured that the demoniac activities directed against them will not be able to stop their devotional service. Jai. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurumimitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Gadadmayam Dadanti Svapadantikam Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhyebhata Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Translation again. The inhabitants of Kimpurusha Loka said, "We are insignificant living entities, and you are the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Supreme Controller. Therefore, how can we offer suitable prayers unto you? When this demon was condemned by devotees because they were disgusted with him, he was then killed by you." Hare Krishna, everyone. So this is a very nice purport and translation, as they always are in Srimad Bhagavatam, because all the purports and translations are very nice to hear about, because they talk about Lord Krishna. So here we're hearing the two different types of persons that exist in this creation. There's the Devas and the Asuras, the demigods and the demons, the Daityas and the Adaityas. And we're hearing how the Lord, the Supreme Controller, he comes for two purposes when he appears. One is to save the devotees, and the other is to kill the demons. And of course, that's quoted in many places in Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. And we hear this often about the two types of different persons. So today I thought to speak about just that, the demons and the devotees, or the Daityas and the Adaityas. And to speak specifically about how what qualifies a demon, because we hear about demons all the time, and we hear about the demoniac civilization that we live in, and even the people like the demoniac scientists, the demoniac politics, the demons who are in charge of this world. And what does that actually look like? What qualifies a demon? Because it's not like people have necessarily like tusks sticking out of their face, and it's obvious like, okay, that person's a demon because he's got tusks and he's got bright red hair and bright orange eyes, so he's definitely a demon, because we can tell by his appearance that that's what a demon would look like. But I'll share today some things from Bhagavad Gita that I've been reading that talk about actually the qualities of a person. the qualities in their activities determine if they're of a demoniac nature or of a saintly nature. And how, I'll talk about that, and then different personalities from our scriptures that I was getting a little confused when I was even trying to study it, but people who might externally appear as though they're of a demoniac nature, but actually inwardly they're very saintly. People who look as though they're of a saintly nature, but actually their internals are very misleading and of sort of leaning towards those of a demoniac nature. And then, of course, demons who look like demons and are demons, and devotees who look like devotees and are devotees. I'll speak a little bit about that later. But first I wanted to speak a little bit about what demoniac qualities are, what saintly qualities are, and finding, and then how to stay clear of demoniac qualities, and how to try and aspire for saintly qualities. Okay, let me get some water. So, of course, fortunately for me in my preparation for class, there's a whole chapter in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 16, Divine and Demoniac Natures. So that made it really easy to find the qualities that I was looking for. So first I read about some demoniac qualities. So chapter 16 of Bhagavad Gita, I'll start with text 4 and I'll go up to about text 15. I'll just read some of the translations. They're very nice. It's Krishna's actually saying in this part, I just told you all about the saintly persons. Now hear from me, O son of Pritha, about like the natures of those of demoniac persons. So pride, arrogance, conceit, anger, harshness, and ignorance. These qualities belong to those of demoniac natures, O son of Pritha. And then the transcendental qualities are conducive to liberation, whereas the demoniac qualities make for bondage. And then Krishna is saying, don't worry, O son of Pandu, for you are born with the divine qualities. And then text 6, O son of Pritha, in this world there are two kinds of created beings. One is called divine and the other is demoniac. I have already explained to you at length the divine qualities. Now hear from me, the demoniac. Those who are demoniac do not know what is to be done with what is to be done and what is not to be done. Neither cleanliness nor proper behavior, nor truth is found in them. They say that this world is unreal with no foundation, no God in control. They say that it is produced of sex desire and has no cause other than lust. Following such conclusions, the demoniac, who are lost to themselves and who have no intelligence, engage in unbeneficial, horrible acts, horrible works, meant to destroy the world. Taking shelter of insensible lust, and absorbed in the conceit of pride and false prestige, the demoniac thus illusioned are always sworn to unclean work, attracted by the impermanent. They believe that to gratify the senses is the prime necessity of human civilization. Thus, until the end of life, their anxiety is immeasurable, bound by a network of hundreds of thousands of desires, and absorbed in lust and anger. They secure money by legal means for sense gratification. This is one of my favorite verses. I call it the me verse in Bhagavad Gita. The demoniac person thinks, so much wealth do I have today, and I will gain more according to my schemes. So much is mine now, and it will increase in the future more and more. He is my enemy, and I have killed him, and my other enemies will also be killed. I am the Lord of everything. I am the enjoyer. I am perfect, powerful, and happy. I am the richest man, surrounded by aristocratic relatives. There is none so powerful and happy as I am. I shall perform sacrifices, I shall give some charity, and thus I shall rejoice. In this way, such persons are deluded by ignorance. And then I wanted to share a little bit from one of the purports to text 9. Srila Prabhupada says, such materialist inventions are considered to be advancement of human civilization. But the result is that people grow more and more violent and more cruel to animals and cruel to other human beings. They have no idea how to behave towards one another. Animal killing is very prominent amongst demoniac people. Such people are considered the enemies of the world because ultimately they will invent or create something which will bring destruction to all. Oops. So yes, these are our demoniac characteristics. People are very cruel, completely uncompassionate, full of lust, have hundreds and millions of desires that they try to engage for their own satisfaction. They do horrible things. They create horrible things that actually end up destroying the world or destroying their power. They take shelter of lust. They try to gratify their senses as the prime necessity for human civilization. And in total, the bottom line is that they do everything they can, and none of what they do is in any way for Krishna's pleasure. That's like the base quality of a demoniac person, is that they're in Maya. Maya is described in Krishna book and in Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavatam as that which is not for Krishna's pleasure, that which is not for pleasing the senses of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is Maya, and that is what a demoniac person is constantly striving for, to please their own senses to the max capacity, which causes them extreme anxiety and is a very distressing position. I know, because I used to be a very demoniac person before I met the devotees. I still am, but thankfully not to the same extent as I was before. But yes, I can attest. If you live a life that's taking shelter of lust, absorbed in your own conceit and pride, false prestige, and you don't even know what the word clean really means. It's just like a thought, really, like, oh, I should clean my room or I should do my laundry. But actually getting into the word clean and understanding what it really means is not something that someone who knows, who's in a demoniac consciousness. There's unlimited anxieties, which is very true. And you're bound by a network of hundreds of thousands of desires absorbed in lust. And later in this same chapter, I think it's in one of the following verses, Srila Prabhupada uses this word moha jala, like a fish caught in a net. Like there's no escaping. I'm not sure if anyone's ever seen, they do those these big like companies in Alaska and Antarctica, these big fishing companies, and they throw this huge net into the ocean, and they have like a giant crane on board of the ship. And then when all the fishes, they catch like these huge schools of fishes, and they get caught in the net, and then they pull up the net from the crane, and it's the fishers, they weigh so much that they have to use like a full construction crane sort of style to reel it in. And you can see the fishes are all like swimming down, putting so much effort into swimming to try and escape the net, but there's really no escape. Once they're caught, then they're caught. And they can't escape even though they're trying so hard. So that's like the living entity of the demoniac nature. It's like really trying to enjoy like anything, but you're really just caught in this net, and you're like, your life is getting like drained out of you, but you're still trying to enjoy to the max. So I'll read a little bit of the divine qualities, and then we'll talk about these different personalities. So there's so much to say about people who have a divine nature, but I thought I'd just read the 26 qualities of a devotee, because that really nicely kind of sums up at least the qualities that people possess who are in a saintly nature. So this is also in chapter 16, this is text 3. The Supreme Personality of God had said, "Fearlessness purification of one's existence, cultivation of spiritual knowledge, charity, self-control, penance of sacrifice, study of the Vedas, austerity, simplicity, non-violence, truthfulness, freedom from anger, renunciation, tranquility, aversion to fault-finding, compassion for all living entities, freedom from covetousness, gentleness, modesty, steady determination, vigor, forgiveness, fortitude, cleanliness, and free from envy and from passion, free from envy and from the passion for honor. These transcendental qualities, O son of Bharata, belong to godly men endowed with divine nature. So, obviously, these qualities are very saintly, and to find all 26 qualities in them in one person, we classify that person as being a pure devotee. But to even strive for these qualities and strive for them in relationship to pleasing Krishna, these activities, they're like Daivi Prakriti, the transcendental. So we try to strive for them even if we don't have all of the qualities, or any of them, but at least the effort of trying to aspire for these 26 qualities of the divine natures. When you see that people have this nature and that they're trying to please Krishna by their activities, they're living a life that's focused, that has Krishna in the center. And these are people that have divine natures. These people fit into the devotee classification, like all of the devotees on Zoom. They all fit into the devotee classification because they're trying to keep Krishna in the center of their life and develop qualities of saintly personalities, saintly natures. So I thought I'd speak a little bit about also, so people have these different qualities, and it's not not necessarily always so obvious who's a demon and who's a devotee, because as we were saying earlier, not necessarily do these people have like tusks coming out of their face. They don't have their bodies aren't as big, as tall and large that they touch the clouds. They don't have gruesome features necessarily. Of course, if they're not wearing tilak, then Srila Prabhupada says, if you don't have tilak on, and not dressed in devotional cloth, then it's like looking at a graveyard. Anyways, that's a little extreme, but yeah. So it's hard to tell necessarily who's a devotee and who's a demon. You can have people who dress like devotees, but actually they have the opposite. They're not very devotional in their mood or mindset. They don't have these qualities. So how do you really tell who's who? And it's easy to judge a book by its cover, or to say, oh, okay, this personality, they look like a demon. They actually do have tusks, and they do have orange hair, and their eyes are bloodshot, and they do have very gruesome features. So easy, they're a demon just by that classification. But it's hard to tell how advanced someone is until they speak. One devotee was saying, what's the quote? I think it's a quote by Chankya Pandit, where he says, you can't tell a fool until he starts to speak. So, until you hear from different personalities, you hear them speak, or then it's easy to judge who they are. And some famous examples of this are King Bharat, Jad Bharat from, excuse me, my throat's really dry, from Canto 5. As we know, his whole life cycle of reincarnation that we read about is very instructive. And when he took his last birth, he took it in a family, and he put on the show of being very dull and dumb, because he didn't want to engage at all with materialistic people, because he was like, this life, I'm going back to Godhead. This is my last opportunity. I'm not going to take birth again. I already got caught up in my previous life and I had to take birth of a deer. I'm not doing that. So he was playing very dumb his whole life. And then he, although he was a great sage, he looked like very rough. You know, he had the body of like a laborer man, like a low-class laborer man. And but it wasn't until he was engaged in the service of the king, of King Rahugana, and Rahugana chastised him for being too slow and for walking in an irregular fashion, even though, because he was a pure devotee, Jad Bharat was a pure devotee, he was trying to avoid killing the ants. And anyways, it wasn't until he started speaking that King Rahugana realized, oh, this is a great sage, like a great sage that I have offended. And when he got down and asked him to please instruct him on spiritual life. So that's one example. Another really classic example that I like, one of my favorite pastimes, is the pastime of Vritrasura. Vritrasura, as we know, is, he was, who was he in his previous life? I can't remember. I'll look it up.
Chitraketu.
Thanks, Prabhu, saving me from using ChatGPT. Yeah, Chitraketu in his previous life. And yeah, he also took on the body of like a really great demon, like a huge, ferocious demon. And came out of the fire and was going to kill Indra, and like, you know, he seemed like he was a bad guy. But of course, when he started speaking and instructing the demons who were fleeing to fight and stand their ground, and he knew, he's like, come on, Indra, just kill me, because actually, you know, I'll win in this situation, because I get to go back to the spiritual world. I know where I'm going after I leave my body, but you have to stay here and continue on in your life, which is kind of material in a sense. So yeah, Vritrasura, another great example of someone who looks like a demon, but is actually very devotional, has saintly qualities. Who else was I thinking of? Oh yeah, Rishabhadev doesn't actually look like a demon, but takes on the appearance of someone who's like lying in the street. Of course, he's a very great and elevated saintly person. He's also in Canto 5, Chapter 5. But yeah, he took on this, willingly took on so much austerity onto his body, but was leading by such a great example that he was actually like so Krishna conscious on the inside, had such saintly qualities. Yeah, I wanted to read just a little bit about him because I haven't read about him in a long time. So yeah, these are just 3 verses that are nice to talk about him. So this is in Canto 5. Rishabhadev began to tour through cities, villages, mines, countrysides, valleys, gardens, military camps, cow pens, the homes of cowherd men, transient hotels, hills, forest, and hermitage. Wherever he traveled, all bad elements surrounded him, just as flies surround the body of an elephant coming from the forest. He was always being threatened and beaten, urinated upon, and spat upon. Sometimes people threw stones, stool, and dust at him, and sometimes people passed foul air before him. Thus people called him many bad names and gave him a great deal of trouble. But he did not care about this, for he understood that the body is simply meant for such an end. He was situated on the spiritual platform, and being in his spiritual glory, he did not care for all these material insults. In other words, he completely understood that matter and spirit are separate, and he had no bodily conception. Thus, without being angry at anyone, he walked through the whole world alone. And then what's happening? Next 2 verses. Oh, all right. Just kidding. My computer just froze, so I'll just not read that. But essentially, he saw that the whole world was kind of antagonistic towards him, so he took on the position of a python and lay down in the street and just took whatever came to him. Sometimes people would bring him things, and sometimes people wouldn't. and he just laid there, and his whole body became covered with dust and looked very gross and unappealing. But because he was like a pure devotee on the inside, and he was completely conscious of Krishna, and he was just dedicating his whole life onto Krishna's service and taking complete shelter of the Lord, then even though his body looked very gross and disgusting, he actually was emanating this very beautiful scent, like a rose garden, just because of his purity. So yeah, this example of the Python man too. Not that he looked like a demon, but he just took on the appearance of like a very, like kind of unpleasant appearance, but he was actually very pure on the inside. And then some people who might have looked like devotees, like, you know, had the appearance of a devotee, someone who's very saintly, but were actually had sort of a demoniac tendency, was people I thought of were like Shukracharya, like the spiritual master of the demons. Even we hear about in the pastime of Bali Maharaj, how he was very like mal-motivated, like Vamanadev came to Bali Maharaj and asked for like his blessings for just 3 pieces of land, or 3 little small steps for him. And Shukracharya knew this is actually Vishnu, so he instructed Bali Maharaj, like, don't give him this, just don't do him, because he'll take everything away from you. And if he takes everything away from you, it means I also will get everything taken away from me, and I, still want things, so don't surrender onto him completely. So although he had like the appearance of like a saintly person, he was actually demoniac, had like was striving for things that weren't in connection to the Supreme Lord. Another person I thought of was Dhritarashtra, because he takes on the position of king, and he is also like has the appearance of someone who is very conscious, but he's has this favors his sons much more than the Pandavas, as we know from Bhagavad Gita and Mahabharata and Srimad Bhagavatam, that he has this inclination towards his sons, although he's in the position of a king, and he's supposed to be equal to all of his subjects and treat all of his subjects equally like his own sons. He has an inclination for his own sons to be superior, and this causes so much trouble, and he does actually have some of the fault that of all of Duryodhana's actions that take place, because he's approving all of it as the king. So yeah, he was another person I thought of. I found this one a little harder. Maybe if anyone has any other personalities that look like saintly, have like the external appearance of being very saintly, but actually are very internally demoniac, they could put them in the chat and we can read them too. And then of course we have demons who look like demons and are demons, and then we have many examples of those in Krishna book, like Putana, or she came in a saintly form, I guess, too, but she was also very demoniac. Or Hiranyakashipu is a great example, Hiranyaksha. So many people that are demons, and they are demons, and they look like demons, and they're demoniac all the way through to the core. Of course, we know that they're taking that position to give Krishna pleasure, and they're actually spiritual, but their whole persona is demoniac. And then we have devotees who look like devotees and are devotees, like Prahlad Maharaj. Looks like a devotee, is a devotee through and through. And we have lots of great examples, of personalities like that in Srimad Bhagavatam. Devotees who are devotees who look like devotees. Lord Chaitanya, Lord Nityananda, all of his associates, Advaita Acharya, etc. So the key is, I was thinking, it's very easy for myself to judge what somebody looks like from the outside, and that's actually mentioned in the 26 qualities of something not to do. One of the qualities that was mentioned is an aversion to fault finding. So it looking at someone and making a judgment, oh, this person's like this, they must have this, they must be like that. That's actually just a fault finding tendency. And it's a quality, at least for myself, to aspire for, to not have that tendency, to avoid fault finding with devotees and also non-devotees. Of course, it's so easy to point out the unlimited faults of people who are who are demoniac and doing demoniac things. It's easy to be like, oh, you're so demoniac. Look at all the things you're doing that are wrong. But I find even if finding faults in demoniac people doesn't help me not find faults in saintly people, because I'll be used to the habit, then I'll do it anyways with people who are actually saintly. So one devotee a while ago was, when I was asking a question about how do you avoid fault finding, and he said a really great thing is to, as soon as you think you start finding faults in somebody, like, oh, this person's like that, this person's like this, or even if you're on Sankirtan and you start thinking, that person's not going to take a book, they look like this, they're like totally not into it. Then you just think, actually, okay, what are 3 nice things about this devotee? Okay, they're like this, they're like this, they're like this. Okay, no need to find a fault because they've got so many good qualities. And actually, if you want to find faults, you can look inside, because we have so many faults internally. At least I can speak for myself. That it's even not worth trying to find faults in other people, because we're full of them. I was listening to one class recently by I can't remember actually who was giving, but he was giving the example of it was Jananda Maharaj. He was giving an example of a sieve. It's like a sieve is going around and he's looking at everything that has the hole in it, and he looks at the needle and he says, look at that needle, you've got a hole in you, you're full of holes, you've got a hole. And he goes around and he looks at the spoon and he says, oh, you're a slotted spoon, look, you've got so many holes in you. And he's finding all these faults and all these things that have holes in them, not realizing that he's a sieve. His whole purpose is that he's full of holes. If he didn't have the holes, he wouldn't even be a sieve. So he was giving the example that it's easy to find faults in others, but actually when we look internally, we'll see that we're full of them too. And it's easy to make judgments about other people, but when we look at ourselves, we can see, oh yeah, actually, I have all these things as well. So, of course, when someone is a demoniac, has very demoniac qualities, and is doing demoniac things and saying demoniac things, then we can think, instead of hating them, we can think, oh, so unfortunate that they don't have Krishna. I wish I could give them Krishna consciousness in some way. How can we get Krishna consciousness into these people who are so demoniac? Instead of instead of just like criticizing them endlessly for all their demoniac activities. Anyways, I don't really have much more to say on this topic, so I'll end there. If anybody has any comments or questions, please share. My computer screen's frozen, so I can't click on anything. So please, if you'd like to share, you're most welcome to.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Thank you for a really nice class. I'm appreciating that you have talents beyond simply narrating wonderful Krishna Katha. You also have valuable reasoning skills and organizational skills. You can put together a nice and cohesive class. And I think it's cool that you recognize an opportunity at this stage of our discussion of this chapter to explain something about the difference between demons and devotees and how they can be recognized. It's important to understand. So having heard these descriptions, I'm thinking, because I look at myself and I see this lowly demon, and but I take some solace in hearing the story of Prahlad Maharaj, who was born in a family of demons, and one would expect that one born in a family of demons would himself be a demon, but circumstantially he was not a demon; he was a devotee. And there are other instances in which we see extraordinary transformations of demons into devotees. So evidently it is possible for a demon to become a devotee. And I want to know more about how I can transform myself from the demon that I am into a devotee with all the wonderful 26 qualities of a devotee.
You're asking me? You should know. You're much more saintly than I am, and been practicing much longer. The only thing I can think of is the process of Krishna consciousness. That's what transforms the heart, and the mercy of the spiritual master can transform our consciousness. And the combination of both of those things can transform us from being someone whose only ambition is to satisfy my own senses, and someone unto somebody whose only desire is, what can I do to please Krishna? So yeah, following the processes of Krishna consciousness, which is Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Padasevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakyam, Atmani Vedanam, that Prahlad Maharaj is speaking in these chapters, hearing, chanting, remembering, serving, worshiping, offering, and surrendering everything unto the Supreme Lord, and then taking shelter of a bona fide spiritual master and following his instructions. And through the grace of the spiritual master and the process of Krishna consciousness, we'll be able to purify ourselves and actually develop these qualities naturally. And then the spiritual master's mercy will also transform our consciousness and our heart completely. And then we'll be able to become very saintly, from a very demoniac, very sinful person into someone who actually has even the smallest inclination to chant Hare Krishna. That's all I have. What about you, Prabhu? What do you think?
That's wonderful. So you say it is a combination of kripa and sadhana, that the mercy of great souls is like a shortcut. You can make huge advancement very quickly by the mercy of a great soul, and otherwise the process of sadhana, the practice of devotional service, and chiefly Shravanam Kirtanam, very powerful means for purifying ourselves and restoring our original saintly qualities. So thank you for that. I have another question which is tougher. And it's I don't want to put you on the spot here, but I'm just curious to see if you have any thoughts about this, and you might not, but it's just something that I think I'm actually something that I'm studying a little bit and hoping to write something about. But in this purport, Srila Prabhupada says that the devotees following in the footsteps of Prahlad Maharaj should not be disturbed by the demoniac activities of the non-devotees. Rather, they should stick to the principles as sincere servants of the Lord and rest assured that the demoniac activities directed against them will not be able to stop their devotional service. And we have been hearing about how, in the case of Prahlad Maharaj, particularly, he is emblematic of this, that Krishna protects his devotees, and but Krishna consciousness, everything about Krishna consciousness is very nuanced. Things are not necessarily black and white, and there are all kinds of complex details to understand. Sometimes we see that a devotee chooses to take shelter of Krishna exclusively and depend upon Krishna for his protection. Sometimes a devotee acts for his own protection to the extent that he can. Sometimes Krishna directs his devotees to do so. For example, Arjuna was instructed to fight. In the case of other devotees, say Haridas Thakur, even when subjected to all kinds of severe threats, he did not attempt to protect himself. He simply took shelter of Sri Harinam, taking shelter of Krishna in that way. So there are different ways in which Krishna Bhakti manifests in different personalities. It's not always the same. Srila Prabhupada sometimes explains that we are not pacifists, but there are examples of devotees, who appear to be great pacifists. They never attempt to defend themselves when under attack. They simply take shelter of Krishna. And now I've lost track of what my question was. I guess I was just looking for any thoughts you might have, clarification on this apparent dichotomy in the behavior of devotees. I guess a few words that could somehow or other sum it up or unify the fact that there are different ways in which Krishna consciousness is practiced, and sometimes it means that we completely depend upon Krishna for protection, and other times it means that that it's appropriate to protect ourselves or to protect others when we have the means. So I guess I'm just curious to know if you have any thoughts about that.
All I can say is Krishna consciousness is very diverse. What I've observed is it's very diverse, and it's one of the things I really like, especially about ISKCON, is that there's so many different ways that people practice Krishna consciousness. Like you've got like the Bhakti Vikas Swamis, you've got like the Hridayananda Goswamis, you've got everybody in between, you've got people who practice in, like, they prefer to live in Mayapur, and they've got a whole bunch of disciples that live in Mayapur. They've got people who live in, like, do Western outreach. You've got people who do temple preaching. You've got like lifelong brahmacharis. You've got a lot of them. You've got lifelong brahmacharinis. You've got a lot of them, or not so many anymore, but so there's just so many different ways that people become attracted, and ways that people like to practice that attract them. And I like to think that this makes sense because Krishna is all attractive, and it's not that we're all attracted to the same style of living. Like someone who might be very simple, and they just have a very simple, like, house, like a very simple home with one very simple room, and they just do everything out of that. They don't even have a kitchen. They just have like a instant pot or a hot pot. They cook everything in. Or maybe they don't even have that, and they just have like raw vegetables every day. And that's very fine for them. They're like very happy in that atmosphere, and they just depend on Krishna, and that's it. And some people need a lot more. They need like they need to design their own house and have their own sauna and have their own like pizza parlor and all this opulent stuff, but they do it all in a way that they dovetail in devotional service, and that's enough for them. That's what they need. So I don't know how to explain it, but that it makes sense to me is that Krishna is like supremely attractive, and even he had 16,108 different palaces in Dwarka, and like, not that we bet, but I had put money down that not all those palaces looked the same. I bet each one of those queens had a different like thing that they found attractive, and they probably decorated their palaces in different ways according to their own like styles of beauty and what they found attractive. Of course, they all found Krishna attractive, so they were very fortunate in that way. And of course, they all served him very nicely and even took on the position of maidservants. But there's just so many different ways that Krishna is attractive to different people, and I think that people execute devotional service in a way that that they find doable, like it satisfies their needs and their way of practicing, and how that is unique with their relationship with Krishna. But I can't say beyond that because I'm not so advanced. I can't see the very broad spectrum. That's just my little box vision.
Thank you. I greatly appreciate your thoughts. So there is a great diversity in the practice of Krishna consciousness. There is a hand up, so I'm going to take my leave. Thank you again. Hare Krishna.
Rudina Palika, Devi Dasi. Would you like to share?
Very cool. Thanks for your class. I really liked your reading from Prabhupada's translations and the purport. I am switching gears here. I have a question about one of the verses you read about the demoniac qualities. That's something that I've always wondered about, but haven't heard an explanation for, is whenever it says that the demoniac person thinks that the world is born from sex desire, like I always took that to mean, well, maybe I didn't really know what it meant, but maybe they just think that that's like the purpose. But then I think maybe one or two verses later, Krishna says that they think that something along the lines, in the verse, they think that sense gratification is the goal of life, or that's how Prabhupada translates it. So then I'm like, oh, I guess it's two different things. So what does that mean, that the demoniac person thinks that the world is born from sex desire?
Good question. I'm not exactly sure either. If I was to take a guess, I'd assume that for a demoniac person, the highest form of sense gratification is sex desire, like satisfying sex desire. So assuming that the world is meant for like fulfilling all types of lessy desires and fulfilling like your senses to the max, then the whole purpose of the world is to satisfy sex desire, which means has so much underneath it, of course. And I was thinking of that small example that Srila Prabhupada says when he's with his disciples, and I think they're in New York, and he like looks and points at all the skyscrapers, and he says all of this was made because of like sex desire. So that's all I can share. Do you have anything you want to add about it?
I have no idea, but I like that. I hadn't thought about that, the skyscraper example. That's good, because basically what Prabhupada is saying is that all this creation of New York City is born of sex desire.
Yeah, like the desire for the man to please the lady to please the man, like back and forth.
Thanks.
Does anybody else have anything they want to add to that, or any other questions or comments? Alrighty, then we'll finish there. Thank you everyone for attending. It's so nice to see so many little boxes. Sorry I couldn't come in person to the temple. Gantraj, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Nitai Gaur Premanandi, Hari Hari Bol. Thank you everybody. Hare Krishna.